Not every day a guy gets to interview the love interest of his best friend's wife, and the guy trying to replace Ryan as a husband and me as his best mate. I've never done an interview before, but I've done a lot of things, like crazy things in Australia. You do understand you can't even get into preschool unless you take a person's life with your own bare hands. Twice.
Totally.
What the hell are you doing messing with my best buddy's wife?
Sir, I have no idea what's happening at all today.
I was expecting not to like him.
Oh, yeah.
But he is so nice.
The nicest guy.
Hey friends, it's Katie. So I just came across something that could be a real bombshell. Or maybe not. You might have already heard about it, but there have been some new developments. Last week in court, there was a big meeting with the judge and all the different parties discussing this protective order. Blake Lively's attorney, along with the PR teams, really pushed the argument that third parties need protection. It all boiled down to their celebrity friends. Lively's attorney even admitted that when requesting discovery from Baldoni and Wayfair, they listed over 24 names, people they classified as high profile. Basically, famous celebrities they've worked with or spoken to who they believe might have relevant information about everything that's been going on. Blake's side was really worried that if these people got pulled into the situation, it could end up hurting their careers too. They were so concerned about the potential fallout that they pushed hard for this protective order. That's not the focus of this video, but there's a new report from the Daily Mail claiming that Hugh Jackman is now being pulled into this dispute. Honestly, that's not too surprising since Hugh was involved in the cross-promotion of Deadpool and Wolverine alongside It Ends With Us. He even interviewed Brandon, who played Atlas in the film, and the whole thing felt awkward. If you've actually seen the movie, you know they completely misrepresented Atlas, Brandon's character, as the love interest. But in reality, he and Blake's character were just friends. There was no romance between them, no kissing, no intimate scenes at all. The most they ever did was hug. It wasn't even really a love triangle. He was just an old boyfriend from her high school years, an important character, but definitely not her main love interest. That role belonged to Justin Baldoni. So when I saw this promotional clip calling him the love interest, I couldn't help but think, why are they framing it this way? This is so weird. And then, of course, Hugh showed up on the red carpet. He was on the red carpet, helping promote It Ends With Us, and now a new report is saying that Hugh is set to be deposed. On top of that, he'll likely have to hand over discovery materials as well. I'll get into that in a moment, but something really caught my attention. Whenever I dive into a case like this, I make sure I'm looking at the full picture. I don't want to get lost in speculation, and I definitely don't want to be so biased that I overlook key details. That means I can't just assume Justin is innocent. I have to stay objective. While going through the documents, I found the amended complaint. This was actually Justin's first complaint against Blake, filed right after she took legal action against him. What stood out to me was how different the first version was from the second. A lot of details had been removed, and that was probably intentional. But as I kept reading, I came across something that helped connect a few dots I hadn't noticed before. It involved claims of threats, allegations made against them, and from the way it sounds, just after the film was released, their publicist at the time, Stephanie Jones, who had seemingly abandoned, she had been losing a lot of major clients, big names like Chris Hemsworth and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. As these high-profile clients started dropping off, she suddenly reinserted herself into the whole Wayfair situation. That's when things got messy. She stirred up a lot of drama and even ended up in a fight with Jen Abel, who was the account contact for Stephanie's company. Essentially, Jen worked under Stephanie at Jones Work, and the situation quickly escalated from there. The publicist representing Wayfair under Jones Works was Jen Abel, but Abel was planning to leave the company, and when Stephanie Jones found out, she wasn't happy. She started throwing out all kinds of accusations against Jen. Out of frustration, she allegedly handed over evidence to Blake, supposedly because she was angry at both Jen and Justin. That's their claim. In one part of the complaint, it states that after Wayfair decided to sever ties with Stephanie, the choice was simple. As soon as Abel left Jones Works, Wayfair followed. The filing insists this wasn't about Abel stealing clients or some premeditated plan to cut Jones out. Instead, Abel was seen as a trusted and loyal team member, and wherever she went, Wayfair. And Bond were expected to follow. On the other hand, Jones was described as a walking disaster, someone whose self-absorption, disloyalty, and insubordination had been a constant problem. Rather than handling the situation professionally, the complaint alleges that Jones started making legal threats and demanding an outrageous payout. She insisted she had done exceptional work and protested that she deserved credit, but by then, Wayfair and Belden had already made their final decision to cut ties with Jones Works. Once Stephanie realized they were leaving, she threatened to sue, claiming they were in breach of contract. She was furious, not just about losing the account, but also because they had hired Melissa Nathan for Crisis PR. Stephanie saw Melissa as a direct rival since she worked with a different agency, and Stephanie believed she should have handled the Crisis PR herself. She couldn't understand why Wayfair would bring in an outsider when Jones Works offered the same service. That sense of betrayal was what really set everything in motion. She started sending letters, trying to convince them to reconsider. On August 21st, she wrote a message to them saying, "Justin, Wayfair, Tara, and the team, you are extremely important to us." She explained that she had received their text an hour earlier, but was unable to make calls at that moment. She apologized and mentioned that Matthew Mitchell, one of their senior VPs, who had been a key executive on their account, had just spoken with them. According to him, nothing was urgent. It was simply about the announcement for a new book adaptation they were working on placing. It seems like there may have already been plans for a sequel. As the message states, we're working on placing it on the heels of IEW in reference to the new book adaptation. She then pushes back against an email she received, saying it was inaccurate. She insists that she had been heavily involved in strategy, planning, account management, high-level PR, media communications, and crisis management, right up until August 9th. That's when she was asked to stop speaking on behalf of Justin and Wayfair, leaving all communications to Jennifer, Matthew, and their team. She stresses that she was present on set during shoots, held weekly calls with her team and theirs, and had many late-night conversations with Justin, especially about Blake, sometimes as late as 11 p.m. or even 1 a.m. in New York. She argues that this wasn't just her effort, but a full team collaboration. She points out that Jones Works had an entire team dedicated to Justin and Wayfair, including a senior vice president, 2 senior publicists, multiple account executives, and a coordinator. Then she circles back to August 9th when she was removed from communication and notes that by August 13th, just 4 days later, a new firm had already been brought in. To her, that was proof that she was being intentionally pushed out. It sounds like they were referring to Melissa Nathan stepping in mid-trial. She mentions that she spoke to someone and also tried reaching out to another person the day before regarding a magazine cover for Justin, one she had been working on for an entire year. She also states that she had made multiple attempts to contact them through email and phone, but had received no response. She then reminds them that they have an exclusive contract with her agency through May 2025 and points out that they hired a crisis PR firm to handle all crisis-related matters. However, she insists that if they now want her team to step in, they absolutely can and will. She tries to reassure them, saying Jones Works is fully capable of managing everything as they always have without any issues. It seems like she was trying to present herself as helpful, but by this point, they were already upset with her. She was clearly frustrated about Melissa being brought in, and it was obvious she saw it as a betrayal. According to the first complaint, the motivation behind all of this was that Stephanie could provide Jen Abel's text messages to the New York Times and Blake as a way to destroy Jen's business for leaving her and taking Wayfair as a client. If that happened, Blake could then use the information against Justin, making it a 2-for-1 situation. Now, whether that was actually the case or not is unclear, but that's how the first amended complaint framed it. There's also another section in the same complaint where they discuss how they had conversations with the talent agency that represents Ryan, Blake, and Justin. Interestingly, one of the executives at this company, who also happens to be Stephanie Jones's husband, admitted that no one ever pushes back on Lively, or Reynolds. Then, on August 13th, 2024, Abel and Heath had another call with the agency's executives. During this conversation, one executive revealed that the agency had spoken to Lively and Reynolds by phone about the intense wave of negative publicity they had been dealing with over the past few days. Heath immediately clarified that neither Wayfair, Boney, nor himself had anything to do with the bad press. However, he was then told that Lively and Reynolds had demanded Wayfair release a statement taking full responsibility for the problems during filming, and if they didn't comply, the couple allegedly threatened to publicly go after Wayfair in the press. The executives also stated that Reynolds and Lively had gone as far as dictating the exact wording of the statement, insisting that Wayfair call It Ends With Us a troubled production and accept full responsibility for everything that went wrong. According to them, Wayfair, Baldoni, and Heath would need to publicly admit to their mistakes and take on all the negativity being directed at Lively and Reynolds. Abel and Heath, trying to get a clearer picture, then asked the executives to specify exactly what Wayfair, Boney, and Heath were supposed to be taking responsibility for. The executives admitted that Lively and Reynolds were simply upset over how social media had turned against them. Surprisingly, they even acknowledged that the backlash was something the couple had brought on themselves, but at that point, reasoning with them was impossible. The executive went on to say that making constant threats was a well-known tactic of Lively and Reynolds. It was just how they operated. Their demands weren't rooted in reality. They were just looking for someone else to blame for their social media crisis. Essentially, they wanted Wayfair to take the fall, not because of anything related to the harassment allegations, but simply to shift attention away from themselves and stop the online backlash. That's when they supposedly turned to Stephanie Jones after months of tension, and when Wayfair refused to cooperate, suddenly the lawsuit appeared. The executives also claimed they made it clear to Sony that they had absolutely nothing to do with the negative articles that were coming out. Allegedly, Sony acknowledged this and admitted that trying to reason with Blake and Ryan was pointless. What stood out to me the most was the claim that this was their usual pattern. Whenever they found themselves in a tough situation, they would try to shift the blame onto someone else and use threats to get their way. Curious, I decided to do a quick search for any past incidents involving Blake Lively and threats, and that's when I came across an article from Gawker. Back in 2014, when Blake Lively was running her lifestyle website, Preserve, she published a blog post that sparked major controversy. The post was all about drawing inspiration from women of the pre-Civil War era, specifically the wives of slave owners. She romanticized the Southern Belle aesthetic and praised these women in a way that didn't sit well with many people. Naturally, once the post went live, several media outlets called her out, pointing out that she was essentially glorifying individuals who were deeply tied to slavery. The backlash was massive, and incidents like this were part of the reason why her website eventually shut down. But the situation escalated when Gawker covered the controversy. They published an article with the headline, "Blake Lively's Fall Fashion Inspiration is Slave Owners." A few days later, they followed up with another post titled, "Blake Lively's Lawyer Wants Us to Take Down This Post." In this update, Gawker mentioned that they had received a legal notice from Lively's attorney demanding they remove the article. The letter stated that Gawker had portrayed her in a false and defamatory light. It specifically claimed that the firm represented Preserve LLC and Blake Lively. The letter from Blake Lively's legal team was clear and direct. It stated, "We have been made aware of the publication of your article titled Blake Lively's Fall Fashion Inspiration is Slave Owners, which remains accessible online. As is evident from both the title and content, the article misrepresents Miss Lively and Preserve, placing them in a false and damaging light. In fact, this appears to be a deliberate, unprotected, and legally actionable attack on Miss Lively's character and Preserve's business. Furthermore, through malicious, grossly irresponsible, and negligent reporting, Gawker has intentionally misled consumers of Preserve's goods and services. This includes the deliberate misrepresentation of Preserve's original article in a way that distorts its intended message. Gawker's conduct has already inflicted financial and reputational harm on both Preserve and Miss Lively. We demand the immediate removal of this article, along with the cessation of any further publication or discussion of its contents. Additionally, we expect you to take all necessary steps to mitigate any further damage caused by these demonstrably false and defamatory claims. We reserve all legal rights, including the right to sue Gawker Media and its affiliates for any reputational or financial harm stemming from this article." This phrasing, "we reserve the right to sue unless you comply," bears a striking resemblance to the legal threats she reportedly sent to Justin Baldoni regarding workplace hostility. They sent this letter to Gawker because Gawker accurately reported on the situation. Now, just to be clear, I'm not a fan of Gawker, and they did end up shutting down due to lawsuits. But in this case, they weren't wrong. Multiple media outlets had already called her out for this, and the backlash wasn't just from one place. Then, in 2015, when she shut down her website, she openly admitted to making mistakes and acknowledged that she could have handled things differently. This battle with Gawker dragged on for months as she tried to argue that it was their fault for reporting what she had actually said, taking inspiration from slave owners for her fall fashion theme. That was the real issue. And it wasn't just that. In the same article where she romanticized the antebellum era, she was also accused of plagiarism. So now, she wasn't just dealing with allegations of racism, but also claims of copying other people's work. This was the same person who later held an event at a plantation, another choice entirely within her control. She had willingly posted content glorifying pre-Civil War women who had owned slaves, and she framed it in the context of fashion, as if that history could be separated from its reality. But instead of taking responsibility, she blamed Gawker for ruining her website. At that point, her site had already been running for a while, and the Gawker article had only been up for a single day before she and her team accused them of causing reputational harm, presenting her in a false light, and damaging her business. It really makes you wonder, how often does a letter like this get sent when she finds herself in a controversy? If she's used these tactics before, that could explain what Justin's lawsuit is claiming, that they make threats, follow through on them, and use intimidation to get their way. And to me, it's like, okay, so you're really going to sue Gawker just to escape the consequences of a choice you made? It's exactly like what the executive at the talent agency said. They always find someone to blame when they're in a tough spot. There's no reasoning with them. They don't care about the truth. They just want someone else to take the fall. So, if she has a history of this, of making threats and trying to shift blame, you have to wonder, how long has she been doing it? That sense of entitlement, where she feels like she can do whatever she wants without facing any real consequences, is pretty telling. And when she makes a threat, if the other person doesn't cave, then she has to follow through. That's exactly what happened with Justin. He didn't back down, and she carried out her threats. It makes you think, how many people has she blamed for her own actions over the years? How many has she threatened with lawsuits just to keep them quiet? With the kind of money and power they have, the number is probably staggering. And with that in mind, the fact that the first amended The complaint basically lays it all out. The talent agency knew that Blake and Ryan were impossible to reason with, and their concern had nothing to do with the issue of sexual harassment. In fact, it wasn't about that at all. Their real issue was the backlash they were getting. Even before she had any proof of a so-called smear campaign, she had already convinced herself that one existed. She told herself that was the only reason for the bad press. She even told her talent agents and Sony executives that Justin and Jamie were retaliating against her. Apparently, when she made that 17-point agreement with them, one of the key stipulations was that they couldn't retaliate against her. So, every time she didn't get her way, she would claim they were retaliating, and because of that clause, she would threaten legal action. The complaint argues that this put Justin and Jamie in a situation where they basically couldn't say no to anything, because if they did, she would immediately claim retaliation and threaten a lawsuit. And honestly, narcissists are often known for being extremely litigious, filing frivolous lawsuits and constantly blaming others for their own issues. So, now knowing all this, and considering that Hugh Jackman might also be involved, things get even more interesting. According to an article about Jackman, a source claims that he will be deposed before the trial. Baldoni's legal team reportedly wants to fully understand Reynolds' actions while It Ends With Us was being filmed. If this case goes to trial, there's no way Jackman can avoid being questioned. The article also states that Baldoni's team is taking every possible step to uncover the full extent of Ryan's behavior during production. Since Jackman is a close friend of Reynolds, starred in the same film, and spent a lot of time with both Blake and Ryan in private, his deposition could be a major factor in the case. The source notes that Jackman actively promoted It Ends With Us, while Reynolds allegedly took several subtle jabs at Baldoni in Deadpool and Wolverine. Given their close friendship, it seems highly unlikely that Hugh wasn't aware of what was going on behind the scenes. Not only did he help promote the movie, but he was also part of the cross-promotion effort, just like Taylor Swift, when they all posed together for that group shot with Deadpool. The source adds that the timing of these premieres wasn't a coincidence. Jackman even attended the New York premiere of It Ends With Us alongside Reynolds, yet when contacted for comment, he remained silent. And considering he was on set during those Nice pool scenes and actively involved in promotions, it raises even more questions. It's honestly so bizarre when you really think about it. The jokes they made in those promotions were completely tone deaf. I mean, this is a film about domestic violence. And yet Ryan is out here joking about killing the love interest of his best friend's wife. Then, in that same clip, he randomly comments on Brandon's butt, asking how he manages to make it look so good. It's just such an odd choice for a promo. So now, Hugh might actually have to address this too. And this ties back to yesterday's video, where we talked about how Ryan is trying to distance himself from the situation, but he can't. There's simply no way for him to fully escape it. Right now, Blake has multiple projects in the works. And yes, Ryan's career is still active, too. But the real impact on their careers won't be clear for a while because everything being released now was already in the pipeline before the lawsuit. The real question is, what will things look like a year from now? Will they still be getting hired? Will Blake be offered new roles? That's when the industry will really start making decisions. She does have a Simple Favor sequel coming up and is narrating a National Geographic special on penguins, but beyond that, what's next? Anything else would have been lined up before all this. So the true impact on her career, and Ryan's as well, will only become obvious over time. As much as he might want to separate himself from her, this situation isn't something he can walk away from unscathed. And now, it looks like Hugh and even Taylor might be pulled into it too. This is exactly why Ryan and Blake are so stressed about third parties getting involved. They don't want their friends dragged into this mess, even though they're the ones who involved them in the first place. Now, maybe Hugh is just an innocent bystander. He might not know anything about it. Or he could actually be wrapped up in it. The truth is, you don't really know until a deposition happens. The same goes for Taylor. But honestly, being friends with Blake and Ryan right now, not a great position to be in. Anyone they've interacted with recently could potentially be pulled into this. They could even decide to depose Paul Feig from A Simple Favor or Anna Kendrick if they wanted to. Really, anyone is fair game at this point.